Hey folks, we're back again with the Retro Ride podcast. This week we have Callum from Retropower, old friend of Retro Ride and man of much YouTube video fame, I guess, and building of awesome cars along with the rest of the Retropower team. So welcome Callum, he's on the other end of Skype, so hopefully this will all go relatively smoothly.
Of course it won't.
It's not how things work. So I'm going to, we'll get into Retropower in a little bit and other thoughts and things on cars and such. But I'm going to start you with a question I do like to start with, which is why cars? Why are you interested in cars?
That's an interesting one. It goes back a long way. I think it really goes back to my parents. We grew up. I grew up from when I was born to when I was 19, when I moved out from my parents' house in a small village. And my parents had a bit of land at the back of the house. And so me and my brother used to just mess around with machinery. My parents were had a reasonable disregard for safety. So we were given things to play with, like big slasher machete type things to go and cut trees down with and that sort of thing. And there was always lots of machinery around, mowers and that sort of thing. We had a ride. In fact, I remember that quite clearly. My brother got a Christmas present, of a second-hand, fairly knackered ride-on lawnmower when he was probably about 11, I think, which he promptly took the cylinder head off and skimmed the cylinder head using like grinding paste on a flat piece of metal. And then that kind of just the both of us just mucking around with, we had ride-on mowers, we had go-karts that we'd sort of half made ourselves. We bought a Mark 1 Astra just to thrash around the field at the back, which now probably was sacrilege because it was relatively good. We got a Mini that was like an old mini stocks race car that we just used to thrash around the fields at the back. And it kind of graduated up from there, but I guess it came from my parents originally. And my dad's always into cars. He's at this point when we were kind of really mucking around with that sort of machinery, he was getting reasonably successful in the job he was in, and was getting some quite nice cars, and that was kind of exciting. He was into motorsport and used to take us to race meetings at Mallory and Donington, which were only just down the road from where we lived then and where I still live now. So I think it all grew from there, and then it sort of graduated up to working on cars before we could even drive cars legally, and then obviously as soon as we could, then it just went into overdrive.
Fantastic. So you mentioned your brother there, who you run Retropower with. How did that come about? How did the Retropower story start? What was the germ of that kind of stuff? So
it kind of led on from what I was just talking about, I suppose. We started mucking around with cars more and more. He's older than me, he's 5 years older, so he was kind of always ahead in that. And his project started to get more advanced. So whilst we were still living at my parents' house, he started to build a Peugeot 205 converted to rear-wheel drive with a Vauxhall red top in it, which was a pretty ambitious project at the time. He built himself a Lotus 7 copy completely from scratch as well. Again, whilst we were still at my parents' house. Now, I moved out when I was 19. He's 5 years older, so he must have been 23 maybe at the time. And then, we kind of just went off in our separate ways, as you do. He went to university, did engineering. I briefly went to university, but then dropped out. And then he basically carried on, became an engineer. He was a process improvement engineer at a steel rolling mill. And then moved on to a company that did rubber extrusions for the automotive industry, again, as a fairly high-up engineer, essentially. I went completely the opposite way, was fairly into music production and got a job in a hotel just to fund that, really. Worked my way up there and became duty manager and bar manager in a pretty big hotel conference centre, but was always kind of drawn back to working on cars. And I just started buying and selling cars in my spare time as a bit of a Dell boy. So it would just give me some money to work on my music. And then it just got to the stage where one day, I was making enough from buying and selling cars that I was actually earning more doing that than I was in my day job. So I decided to jack the day job in. And then I was talking to Nat one day and said, well, should we get a unit and I'll start, doing more of the things we actually enjoy doing. So buying older cars, working on them a bit to make them a bit better and selling them for a bit of a profit. Little did we know at the time that there's bugger all money in that, but yeah, we thought we'll get a little unit, and we did. And initially we bought a couple of cars, spent an incredible amount of time working on them, sold them for probably £1,000 or £2,000 profit, and that probably gave us like a £1 an hour hourly rate or something. But it at least allowed us to photograph our work and put that out there to try and generate a bit of paid kind of commission work, if you like. And that's where it started. And it started by just doing little repairs, sill repairs, welding repairs, and that sort of thing on people's old cool cars.
So Retropower is kind of well known now for these big, fairly extensive builds. We'll delve into those in a little bit. But what was the very first thing you could identify as a Retropower build? I guess, like, what was the first thing that was a full house, taking it apart and rebuilding it?
Yeah, that one's a definite easy one. There's a white Ascona 400 replica that we did, and we basically early on we got quite a name for doing Vauxhalls on Opel, and it was only really by accident. I had a Manta at the time we started this, and my brother had a couple before as well, and we kind of knew them quite well. So through sort of word of mouth in Manta circles, we got a couple of Opels to work on. We did a fairly simple kind of engine swap, as engine swaps go anyway, on a Vauxhall Chevette and a Cadet, and they both got seen at a couple of shows, and I think that generated a bit of interest in Opel circles. And we were posting on an Opel forum at the time, back in the day when people used forums all the time, not just retro. That kind of got us reasonably known in sort of amongst the Opel scene. And then this chap called Kurt came down to see us, and this was interesting because he lived in Barrow-in-Furness, which is a hell of a long way away from the Midlands, and we were quite amazed that somebody would come this far to come and see us. He said, I've got this two-door Opel Ascona, which is it's a rare car, the two-door Ascona B, and I want to turn it into the full wide-bodied Ascona 400, which, to those who don't know, that's basically the rally homologation version of the Opel Ascona. And he wanted to turn it into a replica of those wide-body 400s. So we did a complete bare shell, bare metal build on that, literally starting with a bare metal shell and ending as a turnkey. There you go, there's your finished car. And there was a lot of detail. And, he was the first customer who just wanted it right, wanted it done start to finish. And that arguably is the car that sort of really got the ball rolling in terms of major projects, because he took it to shows everywhere, and it was just absolutely getting awards across the board. Everywhere it went, it got awards, and we were amazed. As far as we were concerned, we just put a car together the way we kind of always thought was the normal way to do it.
Did you feel any pressure from doing that build? So you'd done some engine swaps and things like that before, which are a big lump of work, but it's a different ball game to building a complete car effectively from scratch. If you're stripping it right back, there's a whole new set of skills in here, project management, all of that kind of stuff. So what were your complications and pressures moving from incremental upgrades to complete rebuild?
There's a lot more involved. I don't think we felt the pressure, to be honest. To us, it was all stuff we'd done. It was just combining all of those things together in one car. So I don't think we the main emotion really was excitement. And there was also the other element, which we've experienced a lot since, but not a lot before, was the sort of stress of the customer wondering how much more it was going to cost. But obviously, in those days, and to be honest, this is carried on in that every project we do is trying to be better than the last one, and it makes it very hard for us to estimate the likely costs. And that was the case with that one. We thought, it'll be X amount, and then we could have bandied those sorts of numbers around, and then halfway through the project you get to that amount, and as you get further and further through, you want to do it right, but you're also feeling the stress. And we have great relationships with almost all of our customers, amazingly. It's just a pleasure to work with these guys. But of course, because you get friendly with them, you also feel the stress. When you can tell when they're worked up about how much it's all costing, and you feel that stress. So there was a stress from that side of it, but there was never a stress from the point of view of whether or not we could do it or how we went about it.
So off the back of doing that build, were you ever tempted to actually specialize in a particular area? Like I guess it kind of predated things like Singer a little bit, but surely there may have been a temptation to go, well, we know how to do these red top conversions. We're learning a lot more about it the more you do of them. Was there ever a thought to maybe specialize a bit more, because you do approach all sorts of very different projects at this time?
Yeah, it's never really been a conscious decision. I guess it's just our overall mindset. Yeah, I mean, we did end up doing quite a few red top conversions, not because we were advertising ourselves as specialists in that field. It just tends to be that when you do one, other people see it and say, can you do a similar thing? But certainly the thing that really drives us, and we've realized this more and more as the years have gone by, is coming up with new and interesting ideas, and the concept that everybody's taste in cars is different. And I don't just mean cosmetically. I mean everybody's requirements in terms of how a car drives, how it feels to drive, what it looks like, and all the rest of it, the practicalities of it. Everybody's requirements are different. So, no one setup suits every person, and that's really the sort of fundamental principle on which we come up with our project ideas now. We don't just go, oh yeah, let's stick this engine in it because we've used it before. It's a case of, well, this customer wants the car to drive in this fashion. What's the best engine to solve that problem? Now, yeah, sometimes the same engine keeps cropping up because it's the best solution to the problem. But I wouldn't say we've ever gone out of our way to advertise ourselves as specialists in any particular make or model. Although there have been some accidental, some repeat builds with red tops in on Chevy LS3s, just because that happens to have been the best solution.
So how does a typical Retropower build happen? Does someone just ring you up and say, hi guys, I want you to build this, please? Or is there word of mouth? How does it work?
It's interesting now. I mean, the thing that I find amazing and incredibly exciting now is that we are getting people emailing and ringing me now, literally saying, I want a Retropower project. What do you want to build? Which is it's just an amazing position to be in. And really, it's just I never really thought that at all. We've never planned to be where we are. We always wanted to work on cars, and we like cool cars, and we like building cool cars. But we've never, from the early days, I would have never thought in a million years we'd be building cars for famous people that cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. But yeah, now it literally is. People ring us, and sometimes they have the car that they want, rebuilding, restoring. But I'd say now, more often than not, they don't even have the car. They just have an idea. And in some cases, not even the idea. The Mark II Jag that we're building now, which is the latest one to get a YouTube series, the chap just said, I want something old and interesting, but built with all my own kind of twists to it and a more modern driving experience, and brought me a load of magazine clippings of cars that he liked the look of, and we just worked through it all and said, well, what sort of thing are you going to be doing with it? Do you need to have people in the back of it? How fast do you want it to be? And usually now the first kind of conversation back when we've had an inquiry to me, let's say it's an email to me saying I want you to build something, I usually first want to learn about the customer's history, their background, why are they into cars? Almost like the questions you're asking me. Why are they into cars? What cars have they driven? What did they like about those cars? To try and piece together what kind of person they are and what things they actually enjoy, and how to tailor the car to what they want, because it's the entire package that goes together to create something that they will enjoy, and one person won't enjoy something that another person enjoys. So yeah, it really does just start with an email or a phone call saying I want something cool, either I don't know what that is, or sometimes with the idea of what it is, let's go from there.
I mean, it makes sense, because as a incredibly wise and no doubt handsome man once said, all cars come out of the factory as a compromise, and whatever it is you want out of a car can be enhanced. So if you want it to go faster, you can make it go faster. If you want it to aesthetically be different, you can make it aesthetically different. If you want it to be a comfortable cruiser or a B road blaster, that's going to be compromised from the factory, but you can make it more bespoke. So it's interesting, your approach is effectively to tackle that question first, almost before you say, and what kind of car do you want? Like, do you want a Ford or a Vauxhall or a Jaguar or whatever? You kind of go, where are you coming from and what do you want to achieve with the car? So it's bespoke, it's proper bespoke building, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, almost, the brands almost to us seem irrelevant, and that's why we sometimes get criticised for putting certain engines in certain cars. But it's not that we're doing it intentionally to annoy people. It's just that we approach everything from a completely neutral engineering point of view. So it doesn't matter whether it's a Jaguar or a Ford. It's whether that body shell does the job we want it to do, whether that engine does the job that we want it to do. And that's really what it comes down to.
So I have a question, actually, which will fit in quite nicely here from Simon. We've got a nice little chain of questions from podcast to podcast going. And Simon Coulson, who you actually met because we were at SEMA together, has the question of, if someone gives you the budget to build a Retropower car for yourself, what would it be?
That's an interesting. Well, it almost ties back to another, a couple of points ago, talking about how do these things start. Well, I literally have had probably in the last month 2 inquiries where the people have just said, if I want you to build me a car, I want you to be excited about it. What would you build? And I'll pay you to build it, as long as it's mine afterwards. Which again is just unbelievable, really. But yeah, and one of them, I said, well, my personal dream car is a BMW E9. And yeah, sure enough, there is a guy now who we're still negotiating the exact spec, but off the back of that, now wants us to build him a BMW E9. Pretty much the way I would like it, but it will be for him.
It's slightly more literal version of actually a question that Simon had to answer, which was, because he draws his cars, is that a way of him like modifying and building, satisfying that need? I mean, you get to do that, but with a literal actual car now, I guess.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And
somebody else's money.
We're kind of at the point now where I guess we're picking and choosing and being quite careful about the cars we take on. A, they have to be ones that we're really interested in, and B, we have to have a really good relationship with the customer, and I have to feel that straight away. I have to kind of feel that relationship and know that it's going to be a nice journey. But yeah, we're not really building any cars that we don't think are amazing, and that really that's the way it has to be, because how can you take pride in something if you're not excited about it? But that doesn't necessarily mean they're all cars I would personally dream to own. But yeah, going back to your question, yeah, a BMW E9 is my dream, and the car that I'm actually trying to build between building other people's cars is an E36 3 Series coupe that I want to build as a track car with a supercharged V8 in it. Nice. Which I've done what everybody does who has not much time for these things. I've done all the easy bits. I've stripped it down to a shell and thrown an engine block in there and gone, yeah, the V8's in, and then realised there's about another 3 years of work left to do on it, which I have almost no time to do. Yeah,
that story sounds familiar. I think you kind of also answered the question of what do you drive, but I would hesitate to say you don't drive the E36. So what are your cars? What are you actually driving around in?
So I've got quite a few. The ones that are reasonably on the road are, I drove here today. I'm in the workshop. I drove here today in my Subaru Forester. So I've got 2 kids. I wanted to start doing some camping trips with them, and I wanted something a bit bigger than all the other cars we got. And procrastinated, as car guys do, for months about what would be the perfect solution, and eventually settled on a Subaru Forester XT, which I have to say I absolutely love. It's not like ridiculously fast, but it's pretty fast. It's certainly a lot faster than it looks like it should be. 4-wheel drive, so it grips like hell. You can just give it death off the line. It gets to 60 in like 5 point something seconds, which for a massive car with a roof rack on is amazing. I'm really enjoying that. I got a really nice one. I looked around until I found one with 30,000 miles on it. You couldn't really pick any faults with it, I don't think. So I'm loving that at the minute. Before that, my daily, which I'm still driving occasionally, was a 96 Honda Legend.
Nice.
Which I absolutely love again. It's strange. These are cars you're probably not expecting me to say, but I've driven a lot of cars, as you can imagine. And that, again, as a luxury car, considering it's front-wheel drive, which should be a massive no-no, It's amazing. It's the best luxury car of its type that I've driven, and that includes, I had a 7 Series for a while. I had loads of Jag XJs, and I genuinely think it's a better car. So there's that. On the sort of weekends, taking it out to shows and stuff, I've got a 76 liftback Celica. And that's the first time I've really ever spent any significant amount of money on a car. I think until I got that, I think the most I ever spent on a car was probably $2,500. So I multiplied that by 10 by buying that one. Yeah,
making up for lost time.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I mean, the story of that is actually revolves around retro rides, because the weekender, not last year but the year before, which was that the first weekender?
That was the first weekender.
Yeah, so the first weekender, my wife was with me, and she saw a car. You'll probably know the owner. It was a white liftback Celica that was with all of the other kind of old school Jap cars in that little group.
That's Benny Reese. If you ever need to find him, that's a guy called Benny Reese, or Shoot All on Instagram. He's a legend. She
saw that and said, "That's awesome. I want one of those." And ever since then, because she's never really enthused. I mean, she likes old cars, she likes cars in general, but she'd never enthused particularly about one specific thing. So she said that, and I kept my eye out, and then I spotted one that come up for sale that just looked unbeatably good, and went to see it, and yeah, couldn't really pick a lot of fault with it. Amazing story. You know, the guy had owned it since '94, but he was only quite young. He was 18 when he bought it. And there's just an amazing backstory to it. And it had only done 33,000 miles. It's a UK car, which is really unusual as well. Most of them rusted away. So most of the ones that are good you see now are imports. So it's an original UK car. I've got the original receipt from when it was new and everything. It's just, I couldn't really get a better one. I just thought, if I don't buy this one, I'm never going to get one. So that was the first time we went halves on that with my wife. So that's the first time we've ever really kind of got a properly nice car. So that's the nice one. And then I've got a E30 Touring with the M42 B18. So that's the 318 IS engine, which they didn't originally do in a Touring, but I put one into the Touring and then put it on throttle bodies. So that's a nice one just for summer thrashing around. Sounds the business because it's on throttle bodies. I've got a Vauxhall Royale Coupe, which is pretty much just original. It's starting to show the fact that I left it standing outside for ages, so it's got a bit of rust going through now. But a rare thing, and I'm kind of loath to get rid of it just because I know there's literally single figures of those around still. What else have we got? E36. One more. Oh yeah, I've got a 92 Honda Accord, which I kind of fancied one. My dad had one when they were new. I spotted one that looked mint, had not many miles on it, so I thought, yeah, I'll get that. Cruised around in that for a winter, got salt all over it, made it rust, and then parked it up on my drive with all the others.
Oh, there we go. It's the cycle of car ownership, right? I like this. Oh, I've used it till it's dead. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah. And now I've got to the point where I always regret selling cars, and I don't. So I've decided I'm not selling any cars, which means I'm basically just collecting a load of rusty cars, which I'm never going to get back on the road, but I don't want to sell them.
Oh my God, you're going to become one of those people.
Yeah, I know. Where it's they plead with you to buy the car if you're like, no, I'm going to do it up one day, and it never happens. I've turned into that guy.
Oh wow, that's you're just going to be shouting at clouds soon. It's insane. So actually, we touched on this kind of briefly. You have a YouTube channel which is quite popular, and our mutual friend Jason does a bunch of the video work on it. How did you decide that was going to be kind of a next step? Like, did you start at the Gordon Murray build, which, I mean, we can obviously go into details on that, but there's a whole YouTube series about it, so it's kind of fairly well covered. But was that the starting point of the YouTube stuff, or were you already kind of planning it?
I already had a YouTube channel, which I created a few years before, and I'd just been kind of uploading old bits and bobs of video that I put on my phone. Now we've kind of got on board with the whole social media thing reasonably early, but not with any sort of game plan, as with the whole of the business really. It was just that we wanted a way of, we were photographing all our work. thought it was pretty essential to photograph what we do, because we're quite proud of it. And there's a lot of people out there who just photograph the car at the start and then at the end, and they don't really show you what's going on between, and you kind of immediately raise your eyebrows about that. And so we photographed all the stuff, and then it got to the point where we wanted an easy way of sharing a photo. So we started doing Facebook pages. And that's just made our Facebook presence get massive. But then that kind of moved on, and I thought, well, what else is there? Well, there's YouTube. Started doing the odd little video on my phone just because it was a nice way to show like painted body shells and that sort of thing. And then for a while, I'd been discussing with Nat, saying video is clearly the thing that's becoming massive. People don't want to sit and read, as a generalization, people don't want to sit and read ream after ream of magazine anymore. They just want a quick fix, see it on video and sit in front of the telly. And it's kind of the future of telly, YouTube as well, I guess. So we were saying, we really ought to sort of video a reasonably in-depth feature about the build of a particular car. And another thing that was on my mind was, watching all of these kind of gas monkey type TV shows, where again they just smash through it, and every car's built in a fortnight or whatever, and that isn't really the reality of it. Is not that. There's a huge amount of work that goes into these things, and it takes months and months and months. And it was almost, we wanted to do something that showed the detail to make people understand how much work goes into these things, and that isn't the reality. And then Gordon Murray turned up and said, "Oh, can you build me an Escort?" And we said, "Well, if we're not going to do a video series about this, what are we going to do?" And that's that. Yeah, we started filming it, and I think I'd met Jason around this time anyway, and we were talking to him. Obviously, I think I met him because I saw obviously your Retro Rides gathering video and thought, wow, that's nicely edited, and met him through because of that. And so we kind of got the same camera that Jason had, so we could film everything, day to day, and then he could just come along and do the interview footage and edit it all together. And yeah, it seems to. We're quite surprised. I mean, I thought hopefully it would go down reasonably well. Obviously, it's a bit of a boost having Gordon Murray as the subject in there. But yeah, it seems to be really picking up momentum now.
Yeah, and now you've picked up Project Utah as is kind of the next one you're covering, which is the Mark II build, which is interesting. You, I guess you're going to carry on following different projects, or you got plans to change and expand?
I'd like to do more. It's very difficult. I mean, this is something that's been on my mind a lot lately. It's very difficult for us to do because I'd love to do. I watch things like Project Binky. I watch guys like Colin Furs, and it's amazing watching all the little detail of how they go on. It's incredibly labour intensive to set up, all of those shots, and in the environment where we're working with 10 or 12 guys building cars, and I'm literally constantly answering questions, solving problems, and don't have a lot of time to stop and work on videos basically. So coming up with a way of producing more videos in more detail that doesn't detract from our business is something that we're really keen to try and do, but it's difficult. I mean, we were looking at maybe doing a Patreon account and seeing if we could get enough subscribers to actually fund doing more videos, so we'd get Jason or somebody else here filming more often. I guess the dream scenario would be we'd get to the point where we can have somebody just filming non-stop and video editing non-stop, so we can cover our stuff in more detail. And I know there is a demand for that people obviously like it, and there's always people saying, oh, we want to see less of you talking about the car and more of you actually doing the work, which I'd love to do, and I understand that's what people want. It's just trying to get to the point where we can do that and it not just be costing us time and money, because ultimately we have to remember that our business is building cars, not making videos.
Yeah, I was talking to someone a little while ago about TV stuff, or like TV crews coming into their workshop and stuff, because they'd been on some TV show, and apparently the TV crew just literally took over, and it was more about the TV crew being there whilst they were trying to build cars. It seemed somewhat problematic, and I guess people do need to remember, it wouldn't be quite so bad for like a YouTube crew, but you are there to build the cars rather than be on the videos, as it were. But have you ever thought about doing TV stuff? Have you been approached on that kind of thing?
Yeah, we've been approached a lot. We got as far as kind of initial trial filming sessions with 2 or 3 production companies. But to be honest, the idea, I was always disappointed with the ideas. They always wanted to inject kind of jeopardy and competition into it. And they were obviously not car guys, and you can't, I don't think, portray the car guy mentality unless you are one, which is one of the reasons I was really keen to get Jason on board doing the video editing, because he's a car guy. And so I just didn't feel at any point that any of those approaches we got from production companies were going to go down the right avenue. So it was kind of, I started to shy away and not really want to communicate with them, and so the ideas fizzled out. I kind of would like one day it would certainly be nice if somebody came up, and said, well, we've got the funding, we want to just film with you every day. And obviously there are shows where that is the case, but I can understand likewise that it's a hell of a gamble for the production company, because to cover, say, a number of car builds start to finish, they've got to be here filming all the time throughout the whole build of a car, which could be 18 months, 2 years even. And to do that on the hope that it's going to work is a serious investment from the production.
Yeah, that's a lot of commitment, and also, I mean, it's still a relatively niche area. Like there's a reason that Top Gear is quite populist in its way, because it has to be if it's going to reach a big audience. Whereas something like your kind of workshop is more of a niche that a lot of people are very interested in, and everybody that's interested in it would watch. But 2 years worth of filming is quite a lot of money.
It's still it's still relatively niche. I'm pretty happy that YouTube or a similar format is going to be the way forward, and I would be happier if we were involved with it, in terms of the content, because I'll be happy that what we think is interesting is going to be interesting to like-minded people, and ultimately that's who I want to appeal to. I'm not too bothered about appealing to the maximum number of people. I just want to appeal to the people who are actually interested in the stuff we do, rather than trying to tailor the stuff to the interest of the masses.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. That makes absolutely complete sense. So we talked about it. So how was the Gordon Murray intro? What was that day like?
Like a dream. It was like it didn't happen. It still feels like that now. The car's no longer here, and it's like, did that even happen? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it did. But yeah, it was bizarre. I've sort of said the story many times before, but yeah, I think I was away at the time, and I just got a message with a photograph of a post-it note which said Gordon Murray is coming on Monday, and that was the day I was first back in after holiday. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a random message. Why are they just sending me a message that some random guy is coming on Monday? And I thought, well, it can't be the Gordon Murray, surely. But yeah, sure enough, Monday came, and the Gordon Murray just walked in through the door and said, I'm thinking about getting a Mark 1 Escort built, a modified one, and thought you guys might be able to do it. And yeah, and the conversation went from there. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And that's now all handed over. So I'm guessing we're going to get that final part of the video, which people keep asking for.
Yeah, we definitely will at some point. Obviously, that's further hampered at the moment by this whole pesky virus situation. But yes, the last I heard, he still hadn't driven it, which was slightly. It was a little disappointing. I mean, he was full of praise. He said he'd been all over it, been showing all his mates over the Christmas holiday, and he's written. He said, "Oh, do you want a testimonial?" Phone when I last spoke to him. I was like, "Oh, yeah, obviously." And then I heard nothing more of it. And then in Classic Car magazine, about a month later, he did a full page feature written by himself, which was basically just saying how good he thought the car was. So yeah, I mean, he's obviously happy, but as I say, the proof will be in the driving of the car, which as it stands now, I don't know whether he's done that or not. Certainly the last time I spoke to him, he hadn't, but that was probably maybe 2 months ago. But yeah, the plan was always that we wanted to get it handed over at Christmas. I didn't want to inundate him with cameras and all of that sort of thing when we were literally handing over the car for the first time. So the plan is, when he's sort of happy with it and we've heard back from him saying he's driven it and it's ace, and hopefully, or failing that, if we get it back and do some tweaks and he has it back again, we will organise a last episode, and I want that to be pretty spectacular. So it's going to either be him out driving on the road in it or around the track, talking about it, and yeah, we'll make sure it's a fitting finale. But I don't know whether that will be I don't know the timescale at all. It could be next year for all I know at the minute. We just don't know at the moment.
Yeah, no, tell me about that. Yeah, timescales got very interesting all of a sudden. So you do a lot of kind of different projects on lots of different types of cars, which seems to be kind of your established brand, as it were. No job too small, or no job too big. Sorry. But so far, what's been the hardest work that you found to do on anything? Like what's been a particularly troublesome car, or option on a car, as it were?
I think as a generalization, contrary to what you probably think, the original restorations back to just a standard car are probably some of the more challenging ones. It sounds odd to say that, but the sort of engineering, when we've got a blank canvas, we're reasonably confident with that. We've got some amazing guys here, really talented engineers. Lots of people, my brother and two others, really CAD proficient. These days we're drawing so many parts for the cars, having them CNC machine. We're basically designing and making most of the parts anyway. And that actually is relatively straightforward. It's when we're having to replicate how it was originally precisely that it actually becomes really challenging, particularly from the parts sourcing point of view. And actually, it's sometimes on the cars you wouldn't expect. So some of the more expensive things we've got, just out of camera shot from me over here, we've got two old Mercedes Pagodas, 1960s SLs. And parts for those are dead easy to get. I mean, they're expensive, but you can buy everything. Yet when we do something like 1990s cars, we did a Fiesta RS Turbo, and the amount of time we just spend trawling forums and eBay trying to find new old stock parts, because we're obviously trying to turn out every car, really. We're trying to turn out as a new car, so we can't just put knackered old looking parts on it. So we're into either restoring those parts or sourcing replacements. And on the stuff from sort of 80s and 90s, where the cars aren't valuable enough for people to have started reproducing parts, but they're old enough that the manufacturers have got rid of all the old part stocks that they had, it can get really, really challenging to get parts. So yeah, things, just bizarre things, like the RS Turbo had an under tray under the engine. Everybody, they just get lost and smashed within like weeks of owning the cars. And it took us probably the entire project duration of about 18 months of saved eBay searches. And then one came up, new old stock. And we went and we just drove and got it. And it was basically a case of whatever you want for it, we'll pay for it, because we aren't going to get it. I think we ended up paying like 500 quid or something for an under tray for a Fiesta RS Turbo. But if you want the car to be new, what else can you do? I mean, we could have molded one, but then we wouldn't have had a pattern to mold it from. So it's these challenges kind of come from nowhere. Whereas if we're actually just designing it ourselves, we'd have just said, yeah, we'll make it like this. We'll laser cut it out some aluminium. We'll fold it here, weld it there, and yeah, that'll be amazing. But that's not how Ford did it, so that's not how we could do it.
That's super interesting. This kind of stuff is kind of changing. I mean, you must have seen the changes over the last how long have you been going? 5-10 years? We've been doing Retropower. Yeah, so over the last 10 years, I mean, 10 years ago you weren't CADing up something and then 3D printing it as a prototype and then maybe stuffing it through a CNC machine that was available to the size of shop that you are. Like back 10 years ago, CNC machines were, like very serious engineering firms. And I'm not saying you're not a very serious engineering firm, but they weren't really available to the size of sort of people that are modifying cars, as it were. And obviously with the 3D printing and all that kind of stuff, has that changed your approach to what you're doing and how you might tackle a problem?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two sides to that. Yes, the technology has become more available, so there are certain things at our disposal now which we wouldn't have been able to afford years ago. So we've got a 3D printer, we've got CNC plasma, which is just for cutting parts, two-dimensional parts out of sheet metal. And they're amazing to have. The actual sort of full-size CNC machining centres for machining billet parts from aluminium or whatever, they are still realistically out of our reach. So we still use other companies for that, although we do the drawing. Generally speaking, we do the CAD drawings for the parts and design the parts and then just get them machined elsewhere. But the other sort of side is that with every car we build, we're very aware that we're getting closer and closer really to being a car manufacturer. I mean, we're previously we needed a bracket for something, we'd have just whittled it out of the metal on a bandsaw and, filed it and made it until we were happy with it. Nowadays, we're kind of designing everything from such a kind of clean sheet. I was actually having this conversation with somebody the other day because I've got a couple of projects I'm in discussions about at the minute, future bookings. And we're just in the stages of doing some design renderings for one of those cars. And it was literally, we can do anything. He was saying, well, what bits do you need to keep standing on the interior? And I'm saying, well, nothing really. We can basically make anything. I can see we're on this sort of slope where now we're probably CAD designing, maybe 10% of the parts on the car that are bespoke. And that's gone up hugely from a minute percentage, and I can just see it getting to the point. With some of the stuff we're doing now, we're doing another car which I can't talk about, but we're 3D scanning the entire car, CAD modelling the entire car, then modifying that body shape, then using those CAD drawings to CNC machine full 100% scale books to then do composite carbon fibre panels mounted onto, to basically do a full carbon fibre body that's slightly different to the original, or to retrofit onto a standard. We basically unpick the standard metal panels and fit carbon fibre panels that we've done all that work to produce.
That's extraordinarily. Who am I thinking of? Who won SEMA this year? Ring Brothers seems to be their territory. And also, I guess Singer as well. People think that a Singer Porsche is a nicely modified Porsche, but it's actually technically pretty much rebuilt from. It's a new car. It's rebuilt from the ground up, and it's a different shape. The roof line's different. Everything's different, but it's subtle and you don't notice. So I'm guessing you're moving into that territory. That's super exciting.
That's it. I mean, what I can see happening is that each project we do, we're designing and making more bespoke parts, and it's almost getting to the point where I can see the natural progression being that we design an entire car in CAD and make every part and basically make our own car. That's kind of, if you imagine where the curve is going, that's the direction it's going, which is kind of exciting and slightly daunting as well. But I mean, I've talked about it with my brother a few times recently, and totally without much skepticism, if you like. We've both said we're pretty much at the point where we could design and make a car from scratch, and maybe we should do that. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I'm sure will be happening in the future. Not yet, but it's something where we feel we're confident enough to do at this point.
And then you get the joys of the BIVA type approval. Hurrah!
Yeah, we won't go into that, but that's certainly something we've dealt with. I mean, Gordon's car, for instance, is a new car. It's an IVA, fully IVA'd car, and is on a new registration.
That's awesome. It'll be. I look forward to the day you start building your own car. Do you know what sort of thing you'd approach? Like, would you build? I'm assuming it would be in a retro style, or.
We're doing later this year. We're doing an Elan with a sort of remodeled body, an early Elan, but with a speedster style body. So it's just a tiny little aero screen, no roof, slightly remodeled rear. We're doing a lot of our own mechanical components on it. It's having an engine built by Millington, which actually has been built now. It's ready about a month ago. We've managed to get the 500th Millington block casting. So it's engine number 500, and they're built a very special 2.7 litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder for it, which is going to be, well, we don't know, but it's well over 300 horsepower, put it that way, in a car that's going to be about 600 kilos. But yes, that kind of led us into this thinking of, what car could we make that there would be demand for, that's not a complete one-off, and it's a bit awkward for us because it goes against our fundamental kind of principles. It almost annoys me that the likes of Singer and Eagle, much though their cars are absolutely amazing, they are still sort of purveying this theory of exclusivity to a car that's being produced many times, which is almost a bit of a contradiction. And I almost, I tend to say to people, as I said to you earlier, everybody's different. I don't want to sell people the idea of what the ideal car is. I want them to sell me the idea of what the ideal car is, and we just build it. So we've got to be careful, because if we did do that idea, we're almost contradicting our own morals, if you like.
Surely there's a massive options list you could put on it.
True, yeah, and that would certainly be what a lot of people would do. But yeah, what we were thinking was something, probably a car as generally would be used as a track day car, with some sort of really nice, sleek kind of speedster style body. Sort of think the sort of guy who would buy something like a Radical or an Ariel Atom, but wants something that looks way, way better and can afford a lot more than that. The sort of people who buy Porsche 911 GT3s just to use every now and then to thrash around a track, but one that wants something that looks really classic and cool and not just the same as everybody else.
Looking at the kind of area that Noble, I guess, live in nowadays, like the modern iterations of the Noble cars tend to be
a more classic twist. I guess if you imagine Morgan crossed with Noble would be probably a reasonable comparison. Right? We were thinking handmade aluminium bodywork on this, so it appeals to the people who are into kind of classic handmade, all of that kind of that kind of jazz, if you like.
Yeah, proper engineering.
Yeah, basically, people
leather all over the place.
Engineering and handmade coachwork, but want something that's also brutally fast to thrash around a track. So it's basically Noble meets Morgan in that sense.
And Dean can make a tweed interior for it. I'll enjoy that.
Yeah. I actually saw. I can't think who it was, but I saw somebody the other day who was doing a tweed interior in their car, and they had the little Harris tweed tag on it. It looked really cool.
That's lovely. Actually, talking of details and touching on again another earlier bit of the conversation, we met up at SEMA this year. You were slightly more hungover than we would necessarily expect, but well, actually, no, we were expecting it, to be fair. Was there anything there that really caught your eye and you took away? Because for me, it's always there's little bits of inspiration all over the place, and that kind of that's really nice takeaway for me. But I'm not in the same position as you, like where you could actually action some of these things. I'm just going to go, oh, that's a nice thing, and then carry on with my day. But for you, was there anything you saw there that you were like, oh, that's super, I like that, I'm going to do that?
Yeah, there was a few specific things. A lot of it is subconscious, if you like. I think every time I look over that sort of car, you see at shows like that, there's probably dozens of little things I see and kind of store mentally, but don't specifically remember. But I think they subconsciously come back when I'm thinking about designs later down the line. It's a very inspirational place to be because the standard generally is so high, and it was exciting for me because we've always used some of the American kind of hot rod builders as our inspiration. So you said earlier, the Ring brothers, they've been one of my biggest inspirations over the last 10 years. And Roadster Shop as well. I think they had a stand with a couple of chassis on, but a lot of their builds were scattered across other people's stands there. And they've always been a huge inspiration. If you go on their website, they've got kind of step-by-step photographic coverage for all their builds, and they're just mind-blowing, the level of detail. So just being in a place with that level of that standard of work in such high numbers is generally inspirational. But yeah, for me, it was just daft little things. Like, there was literally something 2 days ago. The camera here can see the car behind me. There's this Mercedes that we're building, Kaiser 2 it is. So it's an old W111 coupe Merc. And I'm just doing the plumbing on that, so the coolant plumbing and the AC plumbing in the engine bay. And a daft little thing was I noticed on a lot of the builds there, they were using these Gates power grip hose clamps, which are basically, where you would normally use a Jubilee clip or similar to hold a hose on. It's like a heat shrink tube, but really thick heat shrink that you put over the end of the tube and shrink down to hold the hose on. And it just looks insanely neat because it's just a rubber ring around the end of the hose. So it's little things like that I was noticing. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm actually trying to get hold of some, although it would normally be easy to get hold of that sort of thing. At the moment, it's extremely difficult. But
it's a little bit trickier.
Well, yeah, it's little tiny details like that it's probably the things I generally notice. There's also, it was the first time I found a company called Resto Mod Air. We've been using a company called Vintage Air for a lot of our heater and AC systems on most of the sort of customized builds we're building. I found another company there called Resto Mod Air, which I can't believe I'd never come across before, but their range of billet vents, air vents, was just amazing, and their heater units as well. So that was another useful little take home. And sure enough, I've used a pair of their vents on Project Utah. So yeah, that's already 2 examples of details on projects that were directly as a result of me being there.
Yeah, that's the thing. I thought it would be interesting to see what you took away from it. 'Cause, I mean, I've sort of wandered around and I'd see Troy Trepanier doing something, and a lot of I've noticed the trends of what people are doing broadly, because I keep an eye out for that kind of thing and take a little bit of inspiration from it. But I would never have walked away, because I don't have a need for it, to have look at this vent company and go, oh, that's exactly what I require. So it's interesting for me to see what you would take away from it. So that's good. What was your favorite ride from SEMA that you saw of the complete cars?
You know this one. It was that.
I know this one.
Revolta. It was I only saw it fairly late on at the show, and it was outside, and the lighting outside is not particularly amazing, and it gets dusty because there's cars doing donuts in the car park everywhere. So a lot of the cars outside aren't really quite as spectacular looking, just because sometimes they're half in shadow or whatever. And I was just walking down along, and I just sort of clocked this car out the corner of my eye, and I thought, oh, that's a BMW E9. And then I looked again, and I was like, no, it's not. What's that? And I had to go over and ask the guy, and he was like, oh yeah, it's a nice Revolta. And as soon as he said it, I was like, oh yeah, of course it is. And then I was just looking around it, and you've seen this car as well, that every detail on it was not standard, but it was one of those cars where at a glance you would not know it was a modified car. And that's always one of the goals we try and achieve, is trying to make modified cars not look modified, that make them look like they were always like that. And the work had been achieved on this car sums that up completely. It was, you would not know. It had a glass sunroof, which was a complete bespoke roof, which had been formed, in glass, custom curved to the shape of the roof. The wheels were complete one-offs. There were body mods all over it, but you wouldn't know unless you had a picture of a standard one to compare it with. Obviously, the running gear had a Chevy LS7 in it, I think. And there was just nice detailing in the engine bay, but not over the top. It wasn't sort of really show off and, look at this ridiculously minimal engine bay. It was just nicely executed and functional. And that sort of extended to the inside. It had a really classic looking interior. Everything you needed was there, but it didn't look overly showy. Sometimes these American hot rod builds can just push the line, in my opinion, over to being too much about super minimal show. Yeah, look how clean I've made this, and maybe draw a little away from function, which is something I'm always keen with our builds, to have the two hand in hand, the form and the function. It's all very well making a car look amazing, but to me it's got to drive amazing as well. And I know that's something where you and I, our tastes differ a little. You appreciate more, I think, the cars that are just art rather than necessarily something to drive as well. But certainly for me,
I like both. The thing is that if a car's gonna drive well, that's great. That's a lovely thing. And I like cars that go extraordinarily fast around tracks and stuff. Like, in fact, I almost prefer that, because it's a more pure expression of the desire to go fast. But I can also definitely appreciate cars that are built purely for an aesthetic. I have no problem with cars that are sort of quote unquote undrivably low. Although it's very rare that a car to me is undrivably low. But it's more that pure. It's kind of the pure expression of it. So, like, I can see where you're coming from, and also obviously for your business as well, that makes complete sense as well. You want cars that are completely usable and fulfill these needs. And in some ways, you wouldn't necessarily be going out of your way to build a 1200 brake horsepower car, because that's undrivable in an entirely different way. Whereas I would appreciate the purity of spirit for someone building, ridiculous brake horsepower cars.
Yeah. I guess that kind of notion is very closely linked to the business, and it's kind of it's carried over into my personal kind of opinion as well. But I guess it really does come from the fact that we're trying to build kind of new cars for people, and you can't produce a new product for somebody and say there are things that you can't do with it. A good example would be the Mercedes again behind you. It's on air ride, because we do want to be able to drop it down low, but we also want to be able to come up high. But a random point of that is we wanted to be able to get full steering lock on it and drop it all the way down, which is something that a lot of really low cars can't actually do, because the tyre hits the arch. So we actually
That's why you stretch the tyres.
Slightly in metalwork so that you could get it completely down and completely on full lock. So I didn't have to say to the guy, if you're dropping it, if you're airing it out, make sure you steer it straight ahead, because to me that's something you can't do. I can't say that because it just seems unprofessional. But
that's kind of, again, like, that's why you go to Retropower, right? That's a Retropower thing. Like if you can afford this level of build and get it done properly, that's what properly means in this case. So if I'm airing out a car and I've got to consider my steering lock as I do it, that's because I'm building it in my garage. Whereas if I have the means to come to you and get it done properly, if I go to another garage or some other place and they tell me, oh, when you air it out, you can't steer it, well, then you think, well, that's not proper. That's not what you want. So it speaks well to your approach that that's what you're aiming for, is this fully usable new bespoke car, effectively.
Yeah. Going back randomly to the sort of me liking a car that kind of drives well as looking good. I mean, that actually links quite well back in with the Ring Brothers thing. That's one of the things I've always loved about them, is that they do have that kind of show car level of execution. It's mind-blowing. And I must admit, in a lot of cases of their builds, I don't really like the cosmetic choices. I don't particularly like the look of a lot of their builds. But I appreciate the level of execution is unbelievable. And the thing I really love about them that's really has always inspired me, and I guess is one of the reasons I've said what I've just said, is that they always say also, these cars are to be driven. We don't like the kind of mirrors under the cars that are show guys. We just want to we want to build cars for the guys who just like doing burnouts.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, actually, in a similar thing, if anybody's listening to this that hasn't looked at our YouTube channel, there's a Chevy Blazer that we filmed at SEMA. That it's super clean, it's all bespoke interior, it's LS swapped, it's rear wheel drive, it's just super cool. And last week I saw a video of him doing an auto solo in it, so just like thrashing it around on three-wheeling through a corner, and I'm that's kind of amazing. Like it is a full-on show car, and then he's still like using it, and that's a beautiful thing. I think like I'm fully on board with that. I think that's also possibly a misnomer about retro rides that Simon and I talked about a little while ago, is that much as we enjoy and appreciate cars built for pure aesthetics, like ideally everything is a fully usable car and you can drive it everywhere all the time anyway, and that's kind of the ability to appreciate and enjoy that isn't necessarily separated from the knowledge that a more usable car would be somewhat better, quote unquote. But we still enjoy crazy sharp nose bonnets on cars that are so low you can't drive them. So
yeah, I saw that video. Was it Andy put the video up? I can't remember, of that car that's in storage down at his place.
Yeah, that's my car.
That's yours, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I do appreciate these things as well, strangely. But it sounds like it has no exhaust on it.
It doesn't have much, no. And in some ways, I think that helps when you're looking and designing cars. So that was one of the things I definitely appreciate in part of this modern world, is being exposed to so much other stuff, and being able to pick and choose from that, and then trying to find like the melting pot of what you like. Whereas I guess from your point of view as Retropower, you have to be a little bit more restrained, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think we definitely, all the cars are different because, as I say, we're trying to tailor them to our customers' tastes, but there always has to be an element of retro power about it. In fact, I was saying this to the guy who was doing the renderings for me in my conversation a couple of days ago. We're designing the car for the customer, but it has to have an unmistakable retro power quality about it too, I feel. It's kind of like I feel my job is to kind of take and listen to all of the ideas that they tell me about what details they want in terms of how it looks, how it drives, all the rest of it, and trying to take all that information and then distill it down and create something that ticks all of those boxes but guides it all in the right direction. Because sometimes if you literally listen to the exact things a customer tells you they want and just literally stick all of those exact facts into one car, you'd end up with something absolutely horrific. And so it's kind of about picking the bits that you can say, yes, we did that on this car, but mold it into a package that looks amazing. It's almost basically creating a car that satisfies all the requirements, but isn't necessarily what they had exactly in their mind. They just weren't aware that. It's difficult to explain, but creating.
I get that. I think there's definitely probably actually a podcast in talking through kind of ideation and the building of projects. Again, I was talking to Simon about this, so maybe we'll get that together at some point. Do a little round table with people that come up with ideas for cars and people that actually complete projects as well would probably be quite useful, because let's face it, we can all come up with ideas for cars all day, but actually completing projects is entirely a different matter.
I'm in that bracket too, and it's my own car.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Well, I think we're pretty much coming close to time, because it's always lovely to chat to you, and I could keep on going forever. I'm going to ask you one of my little emergency questions and ask you, what is the scariest car you've been in?
A Mini with a red top, I would say.
That'll do it.
200 I can't remember, a lot, 250 horsepower, I think. The torque steer is a severe issue. Basically, if you take a Mini with the standard length suspension arms, which give you a terrible bump steer problems anyway, a really flexible front subframe, and then put 250 horsepower in it, I can definitely say that you've created something that generates a lot of torque steer. I mean, absolutely amazingly, insanely fast, and sort of fun in a scary way. But if you unless you fancy putting half a lock of steering on continuously to keep you going in a straight line, I would say they're not a good idea. There's plenty of other cars that are scarily fast. I mean, the Quattro is probably one of the. We built did a lot of work on a short wheelbase Quattro. The guy Dave West, and that thing is seriously quick. I mean, there's a lot of people out there talking about 900 horsepower, 1,000 horsepower, whatever. That's 500 and something horsepower on Roger Clark Motorsports rolling road, and it is savagely fast. It's definitely the fastest car I've been in. It spins up the wheels instantly in first, and you can basically get through the gears pretty much as quick as you can get them. And also another of his cars, the Millington powered Alpha, it's not scary at all. It's very stable and remarkably easy to drive, but it's also extremely fast as well. I don't know if you saw that going around Goodwood at Retro Rides Weekend.
Yeah, that wasn't a messing around. The Chevette, grey Chevette. Is it Chevette? Cadet? What is it?
Yeah, Chevette. Yeah. Both of those cars, both drivers are very good as well. I mean, Alistair, who we built the Chevette for, we could go on forever, but he's one of those guys who just is an absolute joy to work for. And just literally NFG, shall we say. He had never even done rallying before. He just said, I want to do some rallying, build me a Chevette rally car. And it's pretty much a money is no object rally car build. Absolutely perfect car, and it's the sort of car where people say I'd be scared to use it, and he's just literally taken it out there, done stage rallies in it. He came to Goodwood, the Retro Rides Weekender, and that was the first time he'd ever driven the car. He just jumped in it and drove it all the way to Goodwood from here.
That's incredible, and the way he threw it around the track as well, that was nuts.
He just doesn't care. He was originally going to do his stage rallies by just driving to them, and then he said, I suppose I better get a trailer, because if I crash it might be a problem. His co-driver's never done co-driving before until they started their first rally. They were doing, were running really, really high up running, and within one season they were impressively high up on the standings in these competitions. So that's just another example of a brutally fast car that we've done, to be honest, and only a 2 litre, but 290 horsepower.
It's enough. Like this whole obsession with 900 plus horsepower cars, or if you're in Scandinavia, they're all over 1,000 brake horsepower. It's fun because it's numbers, and I like that kind of lunacy. But you don't necessarily need that. Particularly if you've got an older car that's in a lighter chassis. Like 200 brake horsepower per ton is where the fun button starts, right? So like it's a lovely area to be in, and then you can go up from there. But there comes a point when it's if you're not drag racing or whatever, you're just effectively showing off your numbers almost.
Yeah. I mean, particularly with the roads we have, around here, and a lot of the UK tracks. I mean, not things like Silverstone, but a lot of the UK tracks are quite tight and twisty. And I mean, you're driving an 800 horsepower car around a lot of the UK tracks or down the country lanes around here would not be my idea of fun. I'd much rather drive something with 300 or 400 horsepower, at the most, to be honest. I mean, saw the speed. He had a data logger on the Chevette when he was going around Goodwood at Retro Rides Weekender, and there were pretty high speeds on there. I think the average over the entire lap was 98 miles an hour. With something, it was pulling almost 100 around that corner at the end of the start-finish straight, and something like, I think the peak was about 120 something. So that's still, given that how the unforgiving the runoff is at that track. That's plenty enough for me.
that's more than a little brave, foolhardy, I feel. But he kept it on there and he kept going and he just didn't let up by the sound of it. That is absolutely superb. Well, unlike us, we will have to, I'm afraid, let up and not keep going. So, see, I know how to end podcasts. So thank you very much, Callum. I'm sure we will speak to you again in the future, because it's always a fun time. Is there anything you need to make sure that people know about other than your YouTube channel and Instagrams?
No, I don't think so. If you have lots of money and want a cool car building, come see me. But other than that, just go about your life and don't catch coronavirus.
Sounds like a good plan. Stay indoors. Cool. Thank you very much, Callum. And we'll be back. I'm not sure who is the next podcast, actually. So it'll be an exciting adventure for both of us to find out who that is. Speak to you all soon. Bye-bye.